There's a lot going on in the world, a lot going on in the news. Let me fix myself here a little. I went the wrong way. There's a lot going on in the world, a lot going on in the news. Certainly, the main thing, of course, is this debacle of an Afghanistan withdrawal. But that's not really, and that was our leading kind of topic. But there is a lot of good information out there about that stuff. And guys, if you want to take the time and really find ground to stand on something like the withdrawal from Afghanistan, there's a lot of good information out there. However, it dawned on me this week that we need to send folks out well-tooled to do these things. So I'm going to introduce myself as Kevin Haggerty. Here's my partner, Jim Howard. How are you, James?
I'm doing well, but you said you're going to introduce yourself as Kevin Haggerty. Is that a pseudonym that we need to...
That's a pseudonym for Kevin Haggerty. Well, I have to watch out because Zuckerberg's everywhere.
Yeah, well,
he could be under the table for all we know.
Yeah, but you know what? He's not as big as our God.
Yeah, that's right. He can't...
Our
who
God's
can stand
bigger
against
than
me?
The boogeyman.
Yeah,
remember?
who can stand against me?
That's right.
So
right.
I was thinking this week and kind of always wanting to put out a good product, but not just wanting to get sucked into the drama of the day. Now, for us, the goal of True Christian Talk is hopefully to equip churches and churchgoers, Christians, to have confidence and be bold in the things they believe. But then you turn on the news, you talk to somebody with a different worldview, and you get bombarded from 100 different directions with arguments about your worldview. So we should start by saying this is more an exercise in not so much in defending your faith as it is an exercise in defending your worldview, a Christian worldview in a non-Christian America, right, or a post-Christian America. So there are. I came across this list of logical fallacies, and we'll go through them. We'll just go through them until we go through them. And if it takes a week or if it takes 3 weeks, hardly makes a difference. But we're going to talk about some of the things that we want you to begin to be able to spot in other people, and more importantly, spot it in yourself. So know when you're making a logical fallacy, when you're making a bad argument, the ability to make to spot a logical fallacy tells you if there is going to be a conclusion to this argument, or if this is just are we just chasing our tails here? Do you have something to learn from this person, or are you simply the next person, the person they're arguing with right now, and when you're done, they're going to argue with somebody else? So if you're going to engage in any kind of discourse, you want to leave there smarter, not dumber. So I always say I don't argue down anymore because I want to leave every argument a little smarter, not a little dumber. Well, you can't do that if you're getting sucked into the black hole that is social media and the media in general. And you'll see as you begin to discipline yourself on these 10 logical fallacies to be able to spot them in others and more importantly maybe in yourself, you'll be able to see what is substantial, what argument has substance, what argument requires consideration or commands your consideration, and what arguments are just pissing contests, for lack of a better word.
And that's kind of the thing I wanted to add to it, is that it's a waste of energy when you run into these type of arguments that are happening and you try to inject yourself into it when really it makes no sense at all. I had a guy, to kind of give an example. We have a guy that comes to our Monday night group. At the very end of the night, he made a statement that fired up a couple of people inside the group. And so the group kind of went on him about it because it was truly a statement, kind of an ad hominem, as we're talking about. Mm-hmm. And he was upset because of the people getting upset with what he said. So he took it upon himself that night to go out on Facebook and blast the group. Mm-hmm. People got upset. Well, his statement was the reason why people got upset.
Yeah.
He makes a statement. His statement basically was things like Alcoholics Anonymous, any of these programs like this do not work. Mm-hmm. All you need is God. Mm-hmm. That was his statement. Well, what is your proof behind that? What is your basis behind that? And this is one of the things that we'll talk about. But it fired people up. So now he goes back and he blasts the group and the argument. Well, I at first wanted to respond, send him, respond on Facebook, if you don't like the group, don't come back, which wouldn't have been the Christian thing to do. Or, listen, you kind of brought it upon yourself, making yourself better than everybody else, which is another not Christian thing to do. Mm-hmm. So I sat there and prayed over it, and I felt like, the Holy Spirit just kind of said, don't you have other things to do? And I said, you're absolutely right. And so I didn't respond at all. I see no need to respond when we run into these situations. And we as Christians, a lot of times want to get down into the mud with these people, and we want to try to defend them or defend the Bible, defend God, when really, truly, God needs no defending.
Yeah.
Do we need to tell our story? Do we need to be able to talk about God? Do we need to be able to talk about our relationship with God? Yes. But to go down some of these that we're talking about, I have to look at you and go, why do you – it was funny. Wait, it was funny. The title says Common Logical Fallacies. Okay, we're talking logic in an illogical world.
Yeah.
So how do you argue with that? So being educated to say that's not really true because of this, that's one thing. But to try to argue with the person to get them to change their mind, I don't think you're doing any good.
No, and I think that if this list will equip the individual Christian or anybody that holds a conservative or Christian worldview in a non-conservative Christian environment, that do I want to go down this path? Because let me tell you something: if you win an argument but lose the soul,
yeah,
you've done no good at all.
Yeah,
you've done damage. So
that's kind of what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
Thank you. You hit it for me. You got
so
it.
If the best you can do is, if you're doing this with yourself in mind, then there's no sense to do it. If you're doing it with the other person in mind, that perhaps this person would then cool their jets a little bit and listen to both sides of the argument. So the problem in America, and the problem in the church sometimes, is we have intellectual bubbles that we rarely stray from. Part of what we try to do here is to talk about it and encourage people to talk about it. So to think that that you're going to be some great debater is not really the goal of this episode. So the goal of this episode is, as a Christian, you see these strange arguments and it's going nowhere because of all the logical fallacies embedded in it. I won't participate in it. There's going to be times where you're going to have to participate in hopefully civil discourse, but if it is spinning out of control, right? If the best we can do is I always say if your argument becomes emotional, it's because your logic is failing, right? So the reason that people shout over each other or try to out-emotion each other is because their arguments are weak, right? And perhaps that you shouldn't be in that conversation or that argument.
And this is an important thing for us, too, is that we should not be the ones. Some of these that we're going to talk about, we shouldn't be the ones that do the same thing here. This isn't just Christians walking into, an argument or a discussion or anything like that. Christians do it also.
Yeah.
I mean,
we absolutely do it.
We do it.
I think everybody does it. So the key here is to not only just notice it in somebody else, but particularly if you really want to grow through this process, particularly notice them in yourself.
Well, and we have always said, because one of these things is the appeal to authority. Mm-hmm. I don't. We probably do have some people that look at us as an authority, but we always tell people to go out and do their own research.
Yeah.
Don't just rely on us. If we say something that you kind of go, what? Go out and do your own research. I talked about this, I think, last week. I know I talked about it to you, but this friend of mine who I made a statement about masks are detrimental to children took it at heart to go and disprove me. Mm-hmm. And he, his first response was, where are you getting this news? And of course, his comeback then was Fox. This is what we're talking about here. He's attacking where I'm getting the news instead of the argument.
And that is 20 years ago, maybe that would be that wouldn't even be an issue. But now we do have to consider the source. So if we say, I look at the science and not the politics of something like the masks or the vaccines, we need to realize the science could be affected by the politics.
Oh, it is. So, I mean, we see that a lot.
And so there's no doubt that we are in very difficult times right now. It's very hard to navigate these things. There are no absolutes. I'll tell you that the solution isn't in either extreme generally. So not everybody's a socialist and not everybody's a Nazi, right? So we need to be thick-skinned, and we can do that if our goal in the discourse is to learn something, to teach something, and maybe bring somebody to Christ, or at least not push them away by there's guys, we talk about Steven Anderson in Arizona pretty regularly. He makes Christianity unappealing to me, and I'm a pastor, right? And he makes me not ashamed to be a pastor, but ashamed to be that people could then lump me in to his group, that all Christians then are like that. And that's a logical fallacy, right? So these are, I'll put the list on the screen, and we'll go through them little by little and see if this begins to make sense to anyone. The first one, and this is a common one, they're all pretty common, but this is a common one, an ad hominem argument. In other words, you begin to attack the person rather than attack the topic or the topic that you're talking about. So if your argument begins to slip, it begins to become ineffective or incomplete, you need to avoid the temptation to attack the person. So we see that once you get used to this list, you'll begin to see these every time you turn on CNN or Fox, for that matter. We talked a little bit about, off the air, we talked about the previous administration and how they would, I was not a big fan of him, maybe on a personal level. I suppose he and I could be friends in real life, but I mean,
I think you two would be friends in real life.
I wouldn't derive my theological doctrine from him, but he's no more tainted than I am, right?
Yeah.
So, but we would say, somebody would say they don't want the historical statues torn down, and the argument then would be, you're a Nazi.
You're racist.
You're a racist. So, so in that argument, there's a reason to take the statues down. There's a reason not to take the statues down. But if the best you bring to the table is you want to take these statues down because you're a communist, I mean, the argument's almost is over at that point. You're not going to grow from that. You're not going to learn from that, and nobody's going to be any better off than when the argument started. So to me, I'm not having that argument. We see it. Trump did it all the time with, he would comment on the size of people. Was it size of people's hand? You might know better than me. What are some of the things we saw in
Sleepy Joe? I mean,
well, look, remember the Republican primaries?
Oh, yeah. I mean, Rubio, he took water and was like doing like this because if you remember, after one of Obama's speeches, Rubio was the up-and-coming star, so they had him address it. 2 minutes into it, Rubio had to get a drink of water, and it was an awkward moment. I mean, it was very awkward. So, I mean, he like Trump took out and did something like that.
He attacked Rubio for the...
He called Cruz a liar, a terrible person, because of something that he had said. I mean, he was notorious for, look, Korea, he called Rocket Man,
Yeah.
I mean, he was notorious for doing this, but it was one of these things that the base liked.
Yeah, on a lowest common denominator level, ad hominem arguments are they're fun, they're fulfilling, they're satisfying. So I would make fun of Don Lemon or Anderson Cooper or guys that I disagree with politically. I would make fun of them personally. Now, but in doing so, even if you do it for the laugh or whatever, you haven't really advanced the argument.
Right.
So I would tell Christians, if you see that, don't let that sway your opinion on the given topic. So if you don't agree with the personality, it's principles over personalities. If you don't agree with the personality of the person saying the thing, it doesn't mean you should necessarily dismiss the thing altogether. Does that make sense? So an ad hominem argument, it usually happens once things get heated or when you're
When you're losing.
Yeah.
When you feel like you're losing the argument.
Yeah.
You know,
Trump used it as an offensive thing, where a lot of people use it as a defensive thing. Trump just went out ahead of everybody else and said, "You got little hands.
Oh, this is fake news. I want you to look at here. You're fake. You're fake. You're fake. You're fake." Because he was letting people know that he did not agree with these people right here.
Yeah.
Instead of and here's another thing too. I think one of the reasons. Look, let me go off on a tangent here just a bit. I am not approving of what he did. It fed the base, and it's what made him really popular. But here's the other reason why I feel like he did some of these things. When he called all the news people fake, it was because he didn't have an opportunity to go, CNN just did this report where they have 4 anonymous sources that we know means 0. You have no sources at all, nothing to base it on, and you want to say that I did this. MSNBC said this right here, and we know that that's not true, but yet he didn't have the time to do that, so he just said fake news, fake news.
Yeah,
fake news.
And it was super effective. But
it was effective.
But we as Christians, or as non-Christians for that matter, we as logical people, or people that are even seeking the truth, regardless of your religious beliefs, if you're seeking the truth and you see that, you got to be careful. I mean, it's funny to laugh at, but we shouldn't use it to build our opinion on any given topic.
Or our superiority or anything like that.
Yeah.
Let me say one other thing on this. Whether you agree with any of them, any president that's been there, that is the highest office in this country.
Yeah.
And we should respect the office. Now, when these news reporters, and trust me, I watch a lot of them, but when they continuously call Sleepy Joe Biden or in his basement, eating
pudding,
pudding and things like this, what bothers me about this?
Still the president,
yeah. What bothers me about that as Christians, that's not what we should be doing. That would be like you taking a person that's in your church that has a disability and you make fun of them.
Yeah.
And see, let me finish on this, because this is where I want to make sure that we're perfectly clear here. I feel sorry for him. I am mad at the people that have put him in this position. This man has disabilities that people can see when he walks up on stage. He has disabilities. And I feel so sorry for him, and I am so mad at the ones around him. That's the argument.
And they're exploiting, the way I see it. I agree with you. They're exploiting him. I feel bad for him. And I remember when I was a Democrat, he was one of the guys I liked.
Sure.
Now, I was kind of new into politics the first few years, but I remember most people could remember when he wasn't like that. So I see him stumbling like that, and he put his head down, looked like he was crying during a press conference. It breaks my heart. It's crushing, and it's a little bit embarrassing because he's the president of the United States.
When he lowered his head like that, I felt like all the air went out of his sail.
Yeah,
I felt like at that moment in time he got hit hard, and it was a hard question. It really was a hard question. And I'm going to say this, and people may get mad at me about this, but I kind of had some respect because he had went down the list of the people that they had told him to talk to. And he looked out in the crowd and saw
picked one more.
Peter Ducey.
Yeah, of all
from
people.
Fox News, of all people, and picked him and said, "I know you want to say something, so say it."
Yeah.
And they cut Ducey's mic off because there was a statement said, "Your ex-president did this," and Ducey responded back and said, "You're the president now.
Yeah.
You can't continue to blame the past."
But this is a little off the topic, but he shouldn't be president.
No,
he's just not.
Yeah.
Trump. I didn't think Trump was qualified. I was a Ted Cruz guy, but at the end of the day, he did a good job because he had his wits about him, even for his age. But
he
Biden
surrounded himself with people and listened to them. I have talked to people after people. I have talked to person after person that was in his administration that when he would walk into a room, he would have a preconceived idea of how he wanted it to go. And he would listen to people and say, "Okay, fine, we're going to do it your way."
Yeah.
He was known for doing that. Well,
he is. So the bottom line is when you don't if you're watching the news and you see the people on the news, the anchor or the guest attacking the other person personally, just in your head, let it register that their argument is done. There's no more that I can learn from this.
I stop listening to people when they do that.
I flip it off.
Yeah.
And there's guys I won't watch.
Yeah.
Hannity.
Yeah.
I used to like Bill O'Reilly. I don't really watch the news much anymore, but I used to like Bill O'Reilly. But at 10 o'clock when Hannity came on, I switched. I switched to, who was it, Don Lemon at 10 o'clock at the time.
Oh, God.
So it is, just look out for these things when you see them.
And if Hannity's out there and happens to hear us, calling him sleepy, creepy Joe Biden, that's where I turn him off.
Yeah.
He's lost the argument.
If
you just start talking about the facts of what is going on,
if you're talking about Afghanistan, you've got a good argument.
Yeah.
You don't need to go low like that.
Yeah.
So that's the number one thing on the list, and I don't think these are in any particular order.
But as Christians, what should we be doing? We should not be doing these things. Yeah. We should not be adding the adjectives behind it, the pronouns behind it. Yeah. To really, all it is doing is you're trying to belittle the person you're talking to. You're trying to put them in their place. You're trying to show superiority instead of showing Christ's love and coming back with an honest discussion. Like we said, you look at a person and go, if you weren't so stupid, the argument's done.
Yeah.
You've lost.
Why am I going to take advice from a guy wearing a hat like that?
Yeah.
I mean,
you
you walk into a room. Here's a good discipline, and I have a 12-step background, and I walk into a 12-step meeting, and I have a lot of years, decades under my belt. But I still sit down and think to myself, everybody in this room knows something about staying sober that I don't know, right?
Point.
And it could be the homeless dude that's just there for the cigarettes and donuts, and it could be a new person or somebody younger than me, older than me, whatever it is. Somebody in that room knows more about staying sober than I do, and
that's an excellent point.
And so so you need to approach things that way.
Everybody that's in the room on Monday night when we do our church Bible study has something to give.
Yeah.
And I can say I don't ever look at somebody and go, you're stupid, but there's probably about 7 other of these that I've done before.
Well, and know your audience, because I do it with my friends all the time. We make fun of each other constantly.
I do it all the time.
I'd agree with you, but then we'd both be wrong.
Yeah, But I mean, we do it all the time. But it's in friendship. It should not, as a Christian should never attack the person, directly attack the person.
Yeah, if your goal is to learn and grow from a discourse or an argument, then recognize when someone else does, and don't do it yourself. Recognize when you're doing it, and then why am I doing it?
Right.
Where is my argument not right? What points am I missing? What points is this other person right about?
And listen, when somebody comes up to us and says, "Oh, you're a Christian, that's why you feel this way," what is the first thing we do? We become defensive.
Yeah.
And we really just need to say, okay.
Yeah. So I had people tell me, somebody told me within the last 48 hours, Christianity is a cult.
Yeah.
So first of all, you need to,
that's an attack.
Christianity doesn't really fit the definition of a cult, and I can go in. That could be a whole nother show.
Yeah,
but there are parameters that make things cults. Yeah. But he said, well, everybody believes this. You force everybody to believe the same thing. Well, then everything's a cult.
Yeah.
Right. Your football team's a cult.
Yeah.
Your work is a cult. Your family's a cult. That can't be the standard for a cult, right? And by the way, if you've been around Christianity long enough, you know that we fight about everything. There's 9,000 different denominations, so we don't all believe the same thing.
We can't agree on where to go to lunch. How do you expect us to agree on serious things?
When to start baptizing people. All right. The number 2 on this list is, what does it say? Straw man argument. Right. And this, I'll read the definition. When someone attacks a distorted version of the original argument that they themselves created, i.e. the straw man. So, when you have when you say that well, here's a good example. You find a cop that is a racist. Mm-hmm. Not saying we found one, but I'm sure they're out there, right? That they are more racist than kind of just a neutral judging each other type of thing.
Let me help you here. they're not biased. They're racist.
Right. That's a good example of it. So they don't just have preconceived notions. They have a hate or a vitriol
Yes.
for a people group, right?
Yes.
So you find that one person, and then you then make the argument that cops are systematically hunting down people of color. All white cops are ACAB. All cops are bastards, right?
Yep.
That they're systematically hunting down African-American males particularly.
They get up in the morning thinking, I can't wait to go kill a black man.
So that is a straw man argument. So that doesn't exist in any large scale.
It doesn't exist with evidence behind it to base it on.
It is. So, so there is no evidence of this law. In fact, statistically, the opposite seems to be true. But because you found an example of it, then everybody that fits that mold would fit that example. So if you take somebody, if you take just say a Christian knows a homosexual who molests children, and you make the argument that homosexuals are also pedophiles, it's a straw man argument. It's not true, and the argument really, you've subconsciously or intentionally, you're trying to mislead the person you're speaking to.
Well, and that's dangerous because now,
people, by the way, listening to the conversation.
That's dangerous because now at that point in time, if that person looks at you as a person of authority, then that's what they think from that point on. Mm-hmm. Here's a Christian one. The Christian view of faith is believing something without evidence. Mm-hmm. We should only believe things that have evidence to back it up. So therefore, we should reject Christianity.
Yeah. Well, and I think there is evidence for it, by the way.
Oh, I do too. But that's
I don't think it's beyond a reasonable doubt. I think it's a preponderance of evidence, though, right?
But that is somebody saying that Christianity, faith. What does that mean? And there's no evidence behind it. Well, that's not true. This is the straw man fallacy because it misrepresents the Christian conception of faith and then deems it such a position of irrationality.
Yeah.
The Bible notion of faith, the idea of trust. Furthermore, the trust that the believer has in God is based on God's demonstration of his faithfulness in the past. It's hard to describe faith, but the person is trying to lure you into, this is kind of what you're talking about, into an argument about your faith. How do you justify this? You've never seen God. Yeah. Never seen the wind. People use that argument. Well, that's not really.
Do you love your kids? Because you've never seen love, but you feel you love your kids, right? You would die for your kids. So you're exactly right. So to take a generalization and then slap everybody with it.
Right.
So if you voted for Trump, you're a Nazi. Racist. Yeah, you're a white supremacist.
White supremacist. Yeah.
And the idea that it's that simple is not a reflection of the topic. It's a reflection of the people that think it's that simple. I think they're that simple. That's all it takes for them to believe it, and that is their side of the street. That's a measure of them, not a measure of me.
Once again, this is ignorance here, attacking something that they don't want to talk about. They don't want to tell the truth. They don't even want to discuss it. They just look at you and say, I love the example that you just used there. If you voted for Trump and you were a Christian, you were a white racist. So because you're a white racist, that means that Christianity
is racist.
I mean, it gets into what we call the slippery slope. Yeah. But that is just where this hate starts to come out, is because we hear people. You said him. I'm going to repeat him. Don Lemon. I mean, he came out and just was like, Trump is the biggest racist person I've ever known in my life. For him to be president, he was adamant about saying things like that if you were a voter, I don't even understand you because that means you're a racist.
Yeah.
He had nothing to back that on. But what it does, those that are looking for a cause that are on the liberal side, this gives it to them.
Yeah.
This legitimizes their thoughts about not liking this person instead of not liking this person because he's a conservative, because he backs freedom of religion, because he backs
pro-life,
because he backs, getting the government out of these programs instead of the government running all these programs.
I think you'll see, Jim brought up a good point. You'll see how these also tend to overlap each other. So they're not 10 definitively defined situations, but you'll see people kind of mixing a couple of them together. And as we go on, you'll see what I'm talking about. But so be very careful, that you don't that because you're talking to somebody that isn't of your worldview, of your Christian worldview, that doesn't mean that they are without value, that they don't have something to contribute that may help you grow on your own Christian walk. And you may, if you're having a reasonable discourse, you may be able to turn a light on in them that says, hey, this guy makes some good points, worth looking into. It's kind of what happened to me, right? I was not trying to become a Christian, but I came across some evidence for the resurrection. I'm like, I got to look into this.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, yeah, and I think going on what you're saying there is that if this does nothing than cause you to do what you just said, to go to the Word and look at what the Word says about this, because because Jesus doesn't talk about homosexuality, then homosexuality must be okay. That's you need to go start digging and looking for your own stuff. You need to start working on it. So,
and that is, so I think it's very dangerous and very common to be either intellectually or, in the case of a Christian, spiritually lazy, right? So my pastor says...
That's a good word. That's a great word right there.
Right. So my pastor says this is true, so it has to be true. I find it as being part of a denomination. I respect my denomination. I'm glad to be part of this denomination. But push come to shove, you need to justify your doctrine to me.
Sure.
For us for me to be on the same page, because I'm not going to adopt, just because I'm part of this denomination, I'm not going to adopt your doctrines if I don't believe it. This, at the end of the day, is a relationship with me and God, not me and a denomination, right? So
that kind of brings us to number 3. That was kind of a good lead in there.
I didn't even notice.
3.
Appeal to authority.
Yeah. That was perfect. I mean, wow.
I didn't even see that coming.
This is like a commercial. We have this commercial, and you come right back, because the teaser here.
So we have here an appeal to authority. So then I had a conversation. I had this I was part of this very conversation leading into the 2016 election. And I didn't disclose that I wasn't a Trump guy, but I just wanted to be part of the conversation. And it wasn't done yet, but it was more who votes Republican and who votes Democrat. Now, I'm neither a Republican or a Democrat. I tend to vote nowadays Republican, but back then, even then I was probably conservative. So anyway, they were arguing about voting in the 2016 election, and one of the people there said, and I knew these people, they were educated people, and one of them said, some of these people that vote for him don't even have a high school degree, a high school diploma. And so my argument became, well, so what if they don't? Do they need a diploma to recognize qualities or disqualities in a candidate? I said, should we have somebody with a high school diploma gets 1 vote, associates gets 2, bachelor's gets 3, master's gets 4, PhD gets 5 votes? How does that work? They stopped arguing, but you need to avoid that argument from authority, that appeal to authority, that because I'm a pastor, so whatever Jim says doesn't qualify because he's not a pastor. So his opinions hold no value to me because he is below me. And then, like you just pointed out, the denomination tells me this is what we believe. And so I have to change what I believe because somebody in authority over me says that's what it is. That's not how this thing works. And so readily recognize that just because you don't have a PhD doesn't mean you can't speak into a topic. So if I want to speak, I am just as qualified as anybody to speak into racial issues. Like you're not allowed to speak into that because you're white, or you're male, or you're Christian, or heterosexual. So that takes all of these topics off the table for you. That's not true, right? Just because that would mean that Don Lemon could or anybody else couldn't talk about Christianity, right? Or what about people within Christianity that don't believe what I believe or aren't a part of my denomination? Are their opinions and thoughts and opinions and beliefs without value? I say no. I think it's a big mistake to A, play the authority card, and then B, acquiesce to it. While I respect a PhD's work and what they may know more than I know, that doesn't mean that I know zero now, right? I'm willing to have a conversation with a PhD and let him make his points, and I'm willing to have a conversation with a high school dropout, of which I used to be one, and let them make their point.
One of the things my mom did for me was that she bought the book Emotional Intelligence and gave it to me.
Oh, nice.
While I was in high school, because even though she bought me this book, it was a backhanded kind of insult, because she said, Jim, you're never going to be the smartest guy in the room, but you know how to work people. You know how to talk to people. You know how to deal with people. So she gives me this book of emotional intelligence. And I think that that's one of the things that I have fought through the education bigotry all my career, because I always had a captain or a lieutenant or, somebody above me that had their master's degree, and some even had their doctorate degree, and they were 10 times smarter than me. And when we would get into computer issues, I had one captain that had his master's degree, and the chief, we had this chief meeting with him all the time. And when he took over our unit, he would go in and start answering questions for me, and he was getting things completely wrong. And the chief of police knew it. And finally, the chief of police looked at his captain and said, listen, I appreciate your education, but I'm going to ask the expert here,
The computer guy.
that what is going on. And when we walked out of the room, I said, you know what? I'll make you look wonderful. You just need to let me talk, And that's the thing. You cannot walk into a room and act like you're the expert. I was just at a church where I was talking about church safety, and I'm talking to this guy, and he is listening to everything I say like it was like the best thing ever in the whole wide world. When we got finished with the training and he had left, I said, hey, that guy was a really nice guy. The pastor of the church goes, did you know he was a chief of police here in our town?
Oh, really?
Not one time. I knew he had a police background, but not one time did he look at me and say,
I'm the chief of police.
I was the chief of police.
So I know what we're talking about here.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's what you want to be. It's exactly what you talk about. We walk into a room. I love your AA, really, really. You walk into a room and there's 20 people that know better or know something that can help me.
Yeah.
I always walk into a room and say, I'm going to walk into this room knowing that I'm probably the most educated in this that we're talking about, but I still want to learn something.
Yeah.
So what is the nugget that I can take from this class? What is the thing that I can take and use? And so we run into these things that because he's the pastor, he knows everything. He's the closest to God. Because he's the president of the United States, he knows everything. It would have been better if Joe Biden would have come out and said, listen, we didn't do this right. We're trying to take a mistake we made and fix it. And so bear with us as we go through this. The American public would, his ratings probably would have went sky high because he came out and he did this. And instead of that, he came out, he acted like because I am this guy, I know everything. And it was your president, because now we go back, here we go again, we go back to the straw man. Your president, the past administration is the one who really started this, It wasn't my fault because no.
Yeah. And I think every president has a tendency to blame the previous administration. But
what good does it do?
A perfect example, and this is a little off topic, but a perfect example of being a unifying president, which we dearly needed in 2020 and 2016 and 2012, by the way, was he could have said, listen, the previous administration developed this vaccine. It's safe. It's good. We'll make sure it gets handed out properly. But they never once, for political reasons.
It was all political reasons. They can't.
And then they create the environment where people don't want to take it because they're politically offended. And I took it anyway. I mean, but I took it. I did my homework, and
I went and talked to my doctor. I told you.
I didn't want to go first.
I didn't think I fought it for a long time, but my doctor said go, and so I did. But it was only because I trusted. Okay, here we go again. That's an appeal to authority.
Yeah.
But I trust him. But when I look at other people, I'm just saying my doctor said to do it. but you got to do it what you feel is right.
And it's important people understand you can weight people's opinions, right? So if you're talking to a PhD in theology, I take what he says seriously, right? More seriously than somebody that maybe opened the Bible for the first time 2 days ago. So it isn't like they are without authority, but it isn't that their authority then overrides the beliefs or the worldview of everybody in the room, or in case of the church, the doctrinal foundations of everybody in the room. So if that was the case, I would have had to become a Calvinist, because R.C. Sproul and John MacArthur and guys that I listened to and kind of studied under when I was doing all this self-study stuff, that's what they were teaching. Now I recognize them as a stronger authority than me at the time, but when I go to the ultimate authority, Scripture, I don't see the doctrines that they're espousing as much as I see free will. So
right.
So they aren't without value, and perhaps even in more value than you have. But that doesn't make you without value, right? And it doesn't make the person you apply your authority to with of zero value. So it goes to humility, and it goes to your ultimate goal. If your goal is to learn something, or to teach something, or to bring somebody, at least put somebody in position to plant some seeds that they might one day come to faith, then you won't make these mistakes, or you'll be less likely to make these mistakes. But if your goal is to bring glory to yourself, and that, let's face it, inside and outside the church, that's a big goal, you will step into these piles of illogic all the time. Right?
Well, you got to understand something here, because like my appeal to authority, the example is they said was, Jim has a doctorate in theology, and he says it's okay to believe in evolution in the Bible.
Yeah.
Okay. So you believe that belief because we've qualified him as the expert. We've qualified him as the authority. You know, people call me all the time and say, I have a police question I want to ask you.
Yeah.
Well,
how many plumbing calls do I get every week?
I worked in Virginia and I worked in Florida. Which state?
Yeah.
You know what? But I don't like to be we had this conversation last week. A lot of us are an authority in certain areas. We know that, but it should not be the gospel. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. You know, if I say something, go do your own research. Go look it up yourself. Go find out what you know, like I make a statement and my buddy goes on the internet and can't find my statement. I'm in the dentist chair yesterday. There's a poster on the wall that says people who have gum disease are 3 times more likely to die of a stroke. Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking, and underneath it says the Mayo Clinic. And I'm thinking to myself, where did that come from? You know, if I could look at you and say, the Mayo Clinic said this. Mm-hmm. So I went out and I did a search on the causes of strokes. You know, gum disease wasn't even in there. Yeah. I never could find it. You know, I kept looking for it, you know.
Well, and it goes to 3 times more likely could mean 0.0000001 and then 0.0000003. Yeah. So, but sometimes the way you apply numbers can mislead people.
Well, it's just like we talked about 2 weeks ago about COVID. You know, 363,000 people died of COVID in 2020. That's an astronomical number. Mm-hmm. We all agree to that. We've had so many friends that have had family members die of COVID, or friends of ours die of COVID. Listen, this is a terrible disease. I mean, this ranks up there. But we were talking about the number one disease that kills people is heart failure. I mean, heart disease. Yeah. Heart disease. It's over double of what happened in 2020. But where's the outcry for that?
Yeah.
You know, cancer kills more than was it cancer was second? I'm trying to remember what was second, but it doesn't. Whatever was second, we're not screaming about that.
Well, how many? We may be someday if my conspiracy theories hold out. They're going to be controlling what you eat and what you smoke, and
we've already seen that.
Yeah.
We've already seen that. Governors have said, "Oh, you can't have a big gulp anymore." You know.
Yeah.
You know, really. You know.
None of your. Well, whatever.
Yeah.
So we have of these 3, the first 3 topics are interesting. Now, to close on appeal to authority, because you disagree with someone doesn't mean that you disagree with someone and respect their opinion at
Sure.
the same time.
Sure.
So you and I don't agree. I'm a executive pastor, as a lead pastor, and he and I don't agree on everything, every conversation we have, except I recognize that he's the boss and we're going to do it his way. But doesn't mean that I disrespect him or that I don't like him or that he's crazy or any other ad hominem argument that I could make.
Let's just use an easy example that everybody can understand. Everybody has their own football team.
Yeah.
You're a New York Giants fan.
And you, unfortunately?
I'm a Dallas Cowboy fan. We should hate each other.
Well, we kind of do. So, yeah. So, even though Jim has obviously the moral failure to like the Cowboys, doesn't mean that I can't do a podcast with him.
Team.
Oh, that's blasphemy. So we have I'll put the list, we'll review the last three and we'll close up. We're at 45 minutes already.
Oh, wow.
Ad hominem arguments is where you draw in the person, you attack the person personally rather than attacking their point of view or their argument. So that is you'll begin to see, hopefully, as you do this, that's a pretty common one. You'll begin to see some people, and Trump's a good example of this, go to that first. They devalue the person and therefore devalue their argument. And it's not a good argument, right? It doesn't mean that Marco Rubio didn't have some good points of view. It doesn't mean that Ted Cruz or Jeb Bush didn't have some good points of view. Now, I intended to vote for Rubio, and then I switched to Ted Cruz early on. I never really was going to vote for Jeb Bush, but I probably would have voted for whoever was running in the Republican ticket. But you can have respect for people and disagree with people at the same time. And so there's no sense, if you begin to see people making an ad hominem argument, realize the argument's kind of over, or you being able to glean anything of real value from the argument is over. You might feel better about yourself. You might get a laugh and a sound clip. You know, you might make CNN by saying something clever, but you really haven't grown through the process. Nor has the person that you're talking to, which should be the goal of your conversations in the first place.
Well, if I can jump in real quick before we get to the next one, you should, you as a Christian, and especially if this is a friend of yours, should stop them.
Yeah.
You really should.
Yeah.
If the first thing they want to go, like I said, if Haggerty is listening, please stop saying, sleepy, creepy, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Joe Biden. He's the president of the United States. We all agree that there's issues here. Let's point out the issues. Let's point out that there was a mistake made here or something happened here or something like that. But as a Christian brother to another brother, if somebody says that moron, we should just stop them right there.
And that is emotional, and it's not. And so it really has nothing to do with logic.
We all do it. We all
do it. And I'll tell you, in my proclivity to be colorful and funny, I go too far sometimes.
Sure.
And so, it's one thing doing it with your friends. I don't do it from the pulpit, but there are.
Well, that's why your job as a comedian didn't go very far.
Yeah, that's why I'm a pastor and a plumber. So the second on the list would be the straw man, and that is essentially making up a potential enemy, and then focusing your logic or your argument on something that really doesn't exist or really isn't the key point of the argument.
Russian involvement.
So our example was at the time, all cops are racist.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, that's you should see on the surface when you hear that it's not that's not a good unless they can somehow prove that all cops are racist. But then I think all the young black men would be dead already.
Well,
right? So if Trump was a white supremacist, he was like the worst white supremacist in the history of white supremacy.
Yeah, he was.
He was, because he had women in powerful positions, he had minorities in powerful positions, and he did a lot for those demographics.
We see that the black unemployment was the lowest it had ever been. We saw the gap between what blacks get paid and whites get paid shrunk to where it was almost equal. We were getting to that point. Black females were the #1 new business owners in this country. So if he was a racist, he was terrible at it.
Yeah, and
he was terrible at it.
It's just such a weak argument. And A, I don't want my Christian brothers and sisters to make it. And B, recognize it when you see it, and know that, to me, when I start to hear this stuff, I'm kind of done. If you want to feel like you beat me with your cleverness, that's fine, because I don't derive my self-worth from what you think of me. I derive my self-worth from my relationship with my Creator, and that should be the foundation, by the way, for Christians.
Well, and here's one you hear about Christianity all the time. Christianity is weak. People say that all the time.
Yeah, it's like having an invisible friend or something like that.
Yeah. Well, you're weak. So, that's why, instead of, let's talk about what Christianity really is.
Or really, what do you think's weak about it? What do you think's weak about me? Because I believe it, right? And then the third one we covered, and we'll finish up with this one again, is the appeal to authority. We can have respect, right? Even maybe more respect for one opinion over the other. That's fine, but be open to each opinion. Everybody in the room knows something you don't know, right? If you're the smartest man in the room, you're in the wrong room, right? So don't apply your authority. Don't say because you are this person, whatever that role is. We take a PhD in theology, that only you can interpret Scripture. I mean, the Catholic Church, we had a Reformation in the 1500s for this very thing. Only the Church could read or interpret Scripture. Very bad argument. Don't allow people to make those on you, right? Don't allow people to devalue your opinion unless you have an opportunity to grow from seeing the hole in your reason or logic, and then grow from that. Receive. So it may not feel good, but it doesn't mean we don't receive it and grow from it.
One of the other things I would add to this, if you're the person that people look at as the authority, make sure that you're humble.
Yeah.
Make sure that you don't hold it over them, or I know what's better.
Yeah.
How many times do we as parents look at our kids and go, because I said so?
I do it every day.
Yeah. The thing is that we don't want to argue about it anymore.
Yeah.
So, we use that authority sometimes to
Yeah. And this isn't an argument that that all authority is equal, or no one has authority over you. Certainly my denomination holds authority over me. My lead pastor holds authority over me. It doesn't mean that nobody has authority over you. It does mean that doesn't devalue your opinion in a hopefully a civil discourse.
As long as you're not using the straw man or the ad hominem to I hope I say that word right, in order to get your point across.
Well, I say free will. John MacArthur says election. So then is it election because he's John MacArthur and I'm only Kevin Haggerty? I don't think so.
And Jim Howard says God knows everything, so he already knows who's going to be a Christian. So in a sense, there is an election, but you and I don't know.
Yeah.
The person doesn't know. The person doesn't have a clue whether or not he has free will.
Yeah.
So he makes the choice. He or she makes the choice.
There's foreknowledge, but it doesn't mean that random people are set aside for salvation, and therefore the rest of them are set aside for damnation. I'm convinced, by the way, we play a role in this.
I agree.
Then the other thing would be, so that's all three of them, right?
Right.
Appeal to authority. Now we have some other things to talk about real quick.
Yep.
So
how much time we got?
Say something so I can turn around here.
Okay.
Here it is.
Yes, we have our conference coming up, and listen, I'm going to appeal to everybody that listens to this that they know a pastor. They know a pastor out here, and this is one of these type of things of where every pastor in this community, every pastor in the Tampa Bay area should be at this conference that we're putting on October the 16th. This is Trinity Security Outlaws' 5th Annual Church Safety and Liability Conference. And first off, we got a great lineup. But the thing of it is, every pastor here needs to come and hear Frank Pomeroy speak. Because I've said it, he was the pastor, he is still the pastor at First Baptist Church in Sutherland Springs. And he was the pastor in November in 2017 when the guy came in. And seriously, killed or wounded his whole complete congregation. Mm-hmm. I mean, like he had a membership of around 46 people were at church that day. So his daughter was killed. He was not there. His 14-year-old daughter was there. And his testimony is unbelievable. And to continue his faith And to be as strong as he is, every pastor needs to hear this. Did they go through rough times? Sure they did. Did they question? Were they mad? Were they angry? Sure they were. But you really need to hear it. But we have other people out here, Alan Wilkett, who's a really good friend of mine, human trafficking, Dr. Mark Jones, who's going to be talking about, guess what? Racism. And what he does as a black man to put racism as a sin away and work with his fellow brothers. Sandra Smith, faith-based client, Protect My Ministry. Joanne Barry will be talking about medical. Cameron Allen, we're talking about mental health because, listen, if you haven't seen it as a pastor, that mental health issues are up in your church, you're not paying attention. Paul Adderton is going to come in and talk about general liability. Angela Sarabia, thank you. She's going to, listen, she's good. I've already had a conversation with her, and she's going to be talking about what you as a church need to be paying attention to so that you don't get sued. You know, these things are happening. And, of course, Holly Wade's going to come in and talk about what we're trying to do is set up a regional sharing information with the government because there's a lot of things that go on behind the scenes that churches are not aware of, and they really should be. So that's what we're working on. So we're really excited about this conference. Please, please, please go to our website, Trinity Security Allies, and, register. It's just, especially if you're a pastor.
Well,
I can't say it enough.
I have a big announcement as well.
All right.
I'm finishing my chicken coop, my second chicken coop. I mean, it's not as earth-shattering, and probably nobody benefits from it, but I have no life, Jimmy.
That's not true.
I stay busy, but I don't really accomplish very much.
I just one last thing before we finish, and this is my last talk of the day. Last week when we were sitting here and we were talking, the attack on the airport had happened. The bombing at the airport had happened, and we did not know much information at all. In fact, you and I went to lunch, and I think at that time we heard 3.
Yeah, it was, and then by the time we got to the restaurant, it was 10, I think.
Yeah. I said it last week, and I'm going to say it again. If you had anything at all in putting this president in power by social media engineering, by putting money into places that manipulating the vote. If
what we read in that Time magazine article.
If you had anything to do with that at all, their blood is on you.
Well,
no, I'm sorry. When God calls you home, if he does call you home,
you'll have to account for that.
You have to account for that.
Well, I think well, I'm not a big fan of government, period, but I think I find it very hard to believe that was some kind of accident. So
I don't believe it.
I know I'm a conspiracy theorist.
I know you're.
Which are always fun until they come true. And there's nothing fun about this. This one is heartbreaking and it's been heavy on my heart that we left the Taliban to do security. How about we let them do security at the White House and Capitol sometime, right? If it's good enough for our Marines, it should be good enough for our politicians. And we left all that. We essentially armed the Taliban. You can't convince me that was a mistake or an oversight. You just can't. So that's a whole nother story. God bless you guys. We had a good show, and then Jimmy just threw a wet blanket on it, and I added the water to it.
I wasn't finished, but if it's an hour, I know we got to go.
All right, so we love you guys. Next week, we'll keep going on this list till we get to the end of it. I guess we'll do another 3 or 4 next week. Nobody told you they love you today. We love you.
We love you.
God bless, and we'll see you next week.
Yep.
Bye.
Bye-bye.